First of all, let me thank very, very much. We finally got there. Kotiadis and Antuela Tako, who are going to talk to us today about their experience of doing participation and participation methods in the online environment, which is something that I think. So I am going to turn my camera off so I don't lose my signal and hand over to Kathy and Antuela. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. So I'll make a start first. So first of all, I wanted to say it's a great pleasure and we're really pleased to be speaking to the PSM SIG tonight on online facilitated workshops and to share with you our experience of how we had to adapt our practice during the COVID pandemic, but also how were we able to continue our engagements with stakeholders. Just trying to make, yes, the slides more. So what an outline of what we're planning to talk about today. So first we'll introduce ourselves and our skills. Then we'll talk a bit briefly about what are facilitated workshops and talk about our experience before the pandemic. Then I'll pass on to Kathy, who will talk to you about our experience of facilitated workshops on an online environment. And then we'll discuss our reflections and the lessons that we learned so far. And we hope that the last part, we can hold an interactive discussion with yourselves using one of the tools that we have used during our online facilitated workshops. So an introduction to us and our skill sets. As many of you may know us, Kathy and I have been working together for quite a long time now, for over a decade. And what really brought us together was the work that we did on developing participative simulation models. Prior to that, so that our collaboration, I should say, started in 2009, so it's almost it was early January, so it makes it almost 14 years. But prior to that, we both were working independently in our work. And what was really important was that both our individual work had an element of thinking about people and how people are involved or how people model or do OR intervention. So we had some similarities before that, so which really brought together the puzzle. And then when we started working on developing facilitated simulation workshops, we were at the stage that we were on the same page, and our collaboration has been very good, and we've had a really very successful project that we ran at the time. So with that in mind, the skill sets that we bring is not only building simulation, which is really, I would say, our primary skill, but we have experience in running facilitated workshops, organizing the workshops itself based on discussions in issues and problems that are bespoke for the particular intervention. We have experience of problem structuring methods, including soft systems methodology, systems mapping, to again, as a way to explore a problem and help the clients to identify the key issues and to understand what action should be taken. So as part of our simulation work, I mentioned PartiSim, which is our work on participative simulation. And what I'd like to say here is that we as part of the project that we worked on, we developed a framework, including tools that people can use as and when, but they can be also separated and used in different circumstances beyond simulation, depending on the aim of the project. So just briefly to say, what do we consider as facilitation or facilitated workshops in operational research? we find that this definition by Alberto Franco and Gilberto Montebello sums it up really nicely, which is a process of developing a shared understanding of a problem situation where we work closely and jointly with a client group. So all in all, this is to be considered comparatively quite different to holding a meeting with a client, and it involves a series of activities that help the clients to get a good perception and understanding of the problem faced, either through the development of models or even sketches or PSM tools. We find that this is a complex endeavor, and not everybody has got the training or the experience to run this. However, what we find are the two main characteristics of facilitation is that it involves first in designing a good process in order to achieve to establish or to collect all the information or to discuss all the issues that are being involved. And at the same time, it involves the handling of the process itself, which needs to be transparent, as well as to ensure that clients are involved in the process, as well as the ability for everybody to mutually agree into the outcomes of the workshop. And a very good distinction of the key underlying or fundamental elements of facilitated modeling is if we were to look at it from the view of holding an expert mode modeling approach to what we call a facilitated mode. So if we see that as a distinction between the two, we could appreciate more what facilitation does for us. So while in the expert mode, we see that the OR consultant is the main person that leads the OR intervention, in the facilitated mode, the OR consultant is only one part, one member of the process, where working jointly with the client in workshops, they get together to a jointly or mutually agreed agreement about the problem. Looking at the perspective of how the problem is viewed in the expert mode, we undertake relatively an objective analysis of the problem, and that compared to the facilitated mode where the problem can have multiple dimensions. There might be subjective views, there might be diversity in the views and the way that the problem is seen, which is embraced in a facilitated mode. And perhaps we should say that there are different types of problems that might fit these two different modes, and obviously less complex problems or more straightforward problems may fit better into an expert mode, whereas problems that have more nuances of a situation, there are different people with different views or from different parts of that system, would fit much better if the process was handled through running a facilitated mode approach. Considering also the outcome of an expert mode process in OR, we would be expected to have one optimal solution, which normally is given or recommended to the client, who can then decide whether that is something that they would like to take on and action it. On the other side, when we're looking at the facilitated mode, we expect that the outcome would be not only a solution that is good for the client, but we're now looking at creating solutions that are considered feasible, but also desirable. Again, taking into account the human element and other potential reasons why potentially a quite optimal solution may not be feasible to be implemented in the real life situations. But also there is the understanding that also Christina was saying at the beginning, that there might not be just one possible solution, one exact solution. There might be different or possible options available for the client to then consider the pros and cons, and that is also discussed or can be discussed in those facilitated workshops. So why do we prefer facilitation? As I said earlier, facilitated modeling is not, or using an expert facilitated mode is not the end and be all. There might be situations where an expert mode might be more suitable. However, the kind of problems that both Kathy and I have been exposed to when working in the NHS environment, but also other problems can refer themselves to more complex problems which a facilitated mode of approaching the situations can help us to ensure, first of all, that all the information is obtained, as compared to when you're working on an expert mode where you'd need to have a one-to-one involvement or engagement with the client, and there is lots of contradictory views that might come up by talking to different people. It also is a useful process, obviously, with the right experience of being able to manage the expectations of the clients, to manage the different agendas, their different views, but also different personalities. In many cases, and you might refer also to your own experiences, there will be some disagreements, and the resolution of conflict might be required. And really what we find is that actually some conflict is really good, but we need to, as facilitators, we need to make sure that it is managed in the best possible way, and that is done in a way that it helps the creativity. It also helps the exploration of the problem during the workshop environment, and really it helps us to transparently agree and display the outputs of the workshop, which then is also can be accepted and agreed on by all members that are participants in the workshop. We find that it leads to a strong ownership of the formulation of the problem, and that further down leads to also the team accepting and taking on responsibility for the action to be taken. We also find that through the process of facilitation and the activities that we organize, it supports the creativity being achieved by giving members the ability to share their views and open up the problems so that different perspectives can be taken and then agreed on the most commonly agreed definitions, but also because at times we also do some modeling involved, then there is agreement on how that model representation is really relevant. So now to give you a view of what facilitated workshops would look like pre-pandemic, I would say that these normally, again, you can see there is the ability to share all the information. We might be using sticky notes, or we might be using flip chart, and everything is shared with everybody. People are normally involved and engaged in the process. There is little opportunity for them to be distracted during those focused workshops that normally are really short. We would probably run between a 2-hour workshop, and very well designed so that we can achieve the aims of the workshop within that period. Engagement, as I said, is high. We would also have the opportunity to build rapport and relationships with the participants, not only as part of the group discussions, but also through through providing refreshments or having breaks and speaking to people. So that gave us this element of creating those human relationships, which was easy to create in a physical workshop. And I think I will stop here, and then I'll hand over to Kathy now, who will speak about our experience during the pandemic and that experience of holding virtual workshops.
Okay, thank you, Antuela. I've just asked for remote control.
Yes.
So, okay, so if
I think it's there,
hopefully I've got it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our initial experience, and what you'll find is that I'm going to give you the most honest account, which as I go along will be warts and all. And I'm going to start with, I'm really only going to talk about one project, and it was with the Kent Resilience Forum. So if you remember, the pandemic started around March 2020. So in about 3 months later, just after the first, well, when we were on the bottom of towards the bottom of the first wave, an email came round my department from the VC's office about helping the Kent Resilience Forum, and they had some note to go with it that, as I understood it, they were looking for maybe a problem structuring tool to be able to communicate together. It was a very unusually written note, and most people probably saw it and thought, no, that's not for me. And I felt at the time that it was my civic mission to at least say, I think I might be able to help them. So that I was put in contact with a key person within that team, and I will explain what that team is. So if you've not heard of resilience forums, they're a group of organizations such as fire rescue, police, local councils, county councils, Public Health England, just to name a few, and they come together, especially when there are disasters or disastrous situations and they have to improve the situation. So they were concerned about the pandemic, and they needed to make decisions remotely, so they couldn't meet with each other in a face-to-face environment. So their meetings were not, they clearly weren't going that well, or at least that's what the head of the Kent Resilience Forum at the time felt, and she had contacted the university for help and support. Now, I knew that I could not do this alone, look at the online environment, so I felt that I had to team up with another very experienced facilitator, and obviously that would be Antuela. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Figure it out. Let's just say, okay, good. So we decided that we would run the first workshop. Oh, it's okay. I don't know how that happened, by magic. So we decided to run the first workshop with the overall aim to look at their initial priorities. Now, just to explain, they were concerned not just about a potential second wave, but if you look at where we're located, so I'm located at the University of Kent, we have, we're very affected. We were very affected by Brexit because of the ports, but we could have been even more affected if we hadn't had COVID and we had more traffic. And they were also concerned about anything else going on at the same time. So aside from having the second wave, a no-deal Brexit, there could have been something else. So how would they manage with their limited resources? How could they prioritize? their resources and their time. I have to say, the other person that supported us with this is my PhD student Zoe, who's in the room somewhere. And we decided that we would run a series of workshops. Now, our first workshop was the 26th of June 2020. So at the end of May, they contacted us. And at the end of June, we had the first workshop. And there wasn't any time to say, no, we can just push it away. They really needed an answer. That's quite a short time frame when you have never really organized an online workshop, and it's of importance to suddenly go in that direction. And even though we had all that experience of running face-to-face workshops, we really had to think about how we're going to do it, and we spent quite a lot of time planning it. And we decided that we were going to use Padlet, and that was because that was the only thing that we had that we thought, well, that might be useful. And we also decided that we needed something else for our voices to come through, and at the time we decided it was going to be MS Teams. So we had Teams and Padlets. In total, we ran 4 workshops, but the middle 2 were on the same day in July, and the last one was about a year later, and that was just to look at had what we'd done made any difference? What did the people think? So I'll just go to the next slide. Again, it's a little bit harder when, here we go, I can see it now. So what I'm going to do now is, rather than talk to you about the online workshops, we're going to give you a taster of the online workshops. And this part here is something that we didn't use in the first workshop, but we did use in the second and third. And we called it the Bearded Men game. We had a few games at our disposal. And the reason we used those was because we realized that we had to create something to replace the initial time we spent having a coffee with them and getting that rapport. But not only that, we needed them to get some understanding of the tool as well. So what I'm going to ask Antuela to do, if possible, is to put the link in the chat so you can go directly to the Padlet page. Just to let you know, Padlet is if you wanted to register, it's completely free. We don't care either way, but if you were to put comments, they'll look anonymous if you don't register. If you want your name to come up, you have to register, which takes just a couple of minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you an experience of what we mean by getting people to interact together, and that's going to give you an idea of how we start our workshops. And then I'm going to show you another sheet, another Padlet sheet, which isn't very clear, but it will show you, and I will explain it, which shows you the interactions. So in a bit, we're going to put you into, there's 30 people, so we're going to put you into 3 rooms, and what we want you to do is, in around 6 minutes or less, and this is going to be quite firm with the time, to write down in the purple comments, the comment text box, which each room will have one, so you'll have a named room, to write down the similarities that these 3 men have. So think about it as a bit of a competition. So the group that comes up with the most is the winner for the time being. But of course, we want you to talk to each other in the room and try and brainstorm it a little bit. So is everybody clear with what you're meant to do? Nod. Yeah, good. Okay, I can see some thumbs up. Brilliant. Yeah. So Antuela's got the Padlet. So if you want to, you need at least one person in the room to have access to Padlet, which just means just following the link to get there. And Christina, if you can set up the 3 rooms and allocate people randomly to the 3 rooms, That would be great.
Okie dokie. So I'm going to create them now. I've got an automatic assignment, and I shall just, yeah, I know I'm having trouble with connection as well, Sarah. You know, nothing like Edurone.
Don't worry at all if you
Don't
can't
worry
connect.
about it.
Don't worry.
It's
Only a few minutes just to give you a feel of what we do.
Right, I'm going to open all the rooms now.
Okay, great. I'm going to room 2. Just to say to everybody that's joined so far, well done. I mean, I'll repeat it again, but I've just had a look through and I'm really impressed. Okay, so what shall I share my screen, Antuela, now, or do you want to?
If you find it easier, Kathy, you can do.
Okay, so I'll just share my screen, so hopefully everybody can see. So well done. As if by magic, I can suddenly see even more comments than I did a minute ago. So people are still typing, even though the time's out. So we've got some super competitive people here. And I've got to say, you've got to stop now. So some really interesting comments. A lot of you have come up with the same thing. Now I'm going to say something. If you have attended a session that Antuela where we've done the same game before, I've said the same thing. Antuela and I played the game together the first time round, and we didn't limit ourselves to 6 minutes, but we only came up with 6 things. So just to note that you in your groups, even though you were just thrown in, because there was a few of you, you've got a group, you were able to brainstorm and come up with more ideas than we were able to. And that's pretty important, because it starts to show the importance of group work, that you can put people together, and if they can communicate, even if it's an online environment, they can bring up more ideas. And that's important, especially when you're looking to understand the problem and you're trying to get different aspects of it. We actually had this game just to get people to get used to Padlet. So we wanted them to familiarize themselves with the idea of being able to comment, but we also wanted to break the ice as well. So I'm going to go to the slides now. So hopefully, I'm going to go, sorry, I'm just going to come out because I've gone to the wrong slide and I want to go a bit further up. Okay, so this is the one I want to go on. Okay, so hopefully the writing on this slide is so small that you can't read it, and that's my aim, because some of it is confidential. But this, whereas before you saw a game and interact.
I think we can only still see the Padlet board. I think you might have just shared.
Okay, hang on. Let me try and do a new share. Sorry, I think it doesn't automatically. Can you see it now?
Yes.
No, I'm still seeing your Padlet screen. Oh, there we are. We've got it now.
Okay, good. It is actually a screenshot of Padlet, as it happens. So in this case, even though you can't see the writing, I will explain what's going on. So this was a specific Padlet board, and what we took in was the purple box, which is the agenda, the first green box, the blue box, and the first pink box. So these were kind of the directions. Everything to the right of that was brainstormed by the stakeholders in that room. We took in the table that's in the middle, and everything around that and under that was stuff that the participants came up with. So they physically wrote and posted things, and under what you can't see is under each text box there are plenty of comments. So they're not just putting text box with ideas, but people are commenting on their ideas, they're voting, they're doing all sorts of stuff. So we found that Padlet, this was actually from, I think, from the second workshop, not from the first one, but a similar sort of, we had a similar design for the first one. And what we found was that Padlet in itself was very useful as a replacement tool for post-it notes on flip chart paper and so on. I wouldn't say the experience was quite the same, but it was a good enough replacement. So what was our experience of doing these online workshops? Well, we spent hours preparing. It's not that we don't spend hours preparing for face-to-face workshops, but we really spent hours for the online, because you have to do a lot more designing in advance, thinking about how you're going to manage the process, because obviously we didn't have the prior experience. Our first workshop had about 15 participants. The other ones were slightly under, I think it was some 6 or 8. It was difficult to manage the platforms and the conversation. It was a very different experience to face-to-face workshops. And one of the things that I want you to think about is your online meetings in June, July of 2020 in the pandemic. So what we had right at the beginning when you all came in and the screen froze for a couple of people where, you know, they were kicked out, we had a lot more of that at the time, because the platforms like MS Teams, and even if we'd used Zoom, it would have been pretty much the same. So it was very, very hard to keep people in the room, even if they wanted to. Sometimes they were thrown out and they had to rejoin. The bandwidth was an issue, as was home equipment. Some people didn't have a camera. Some people's mics were broken. All sorts of things happened. It was also harder to manage strong personalities. So we had one person in one meeting that took over the workshop. And now we're experienced facilitators. That doesn't usually happen in face-to-face workshops, but we found ourselves outside of our comfort zone there. And it was a lot to do with not being able to see people face to face. Now, people now have their camera on, but that's because we've got a better bandwidth. In those days, we had to switch off our cameras quite a lot to be able to communicate. And the cues that you get from being physically present in the room are quite strong. So if somebody's saying something and you don't like it, you might not smile, you might cross your arms. And I think the other person gets a feeling of whether they need to carry on or stop. So that's all missing in these online environments. So people that may not understand that they need to sort of, you know, leave that point and let somebody else speak. So it was harder to manage stronger personalities. They couldn't get the cues, and we found it harder to stop them taking over. But there were things that we found that it was easier for participants to contribute to Padlet. So, you know, people could be, as you were typing away, even though we came back in the room, we found that people would continue adding more points if they were interested in something. So we, even after the workshop, we saw things that we didn't notice during the workshop. Did we think the workshop went well? Yes, we did at the time, because we achieved our aims. They told us identify key issues, you need to help us get to that. Did we do that? Could we offer concrete things? Yes. But if we were to think, was the workshop successful from the stakeholders' point of view? Did they enjoy it? Well, that's a different story. Now, the good thing is we asked them specific questions. So we decided before the workshop that we would put together a set of questions to ask them. And some of the answers were a bit of a surprise to us, and they weren't all positive. So some of the findings from this were that, you know, not everybody liked it. Some people felt we spent too long explaining the software, and I'll try and put all these things into context. So when we ran the workshops at the time, some people were not able to access Padlet for whatever reason. they were either too nervous, and what we did, in the same way that now we're projecting the screen through MS Teams, we would project the screen. And we had Zoe, who's somewhere in the audience. If they wanted to add a comment, she would sort of act as an avatar and take the comment from the chat in MS Teams and add it for them. There were some people that were a little bit nervous. So they probably felt that the time that we were explaining the software was not very useful to them. So we kind of understood that point. We knew that there were issues with technology, but we didn't understand the extent of them. So when we asked about that, we found that about half the respondents couldn't hear the others very well, which we weren't completely aware of. We also found out that half the respondents felt that others could not hear them very well. Now, these were not necessarily the same group. So some people felt that they could hear others, but they felt they weren't heard, which meant that this distribution was a little bit more mixed. And about half the respondents felt that whether it was MS Teams or Padlet was not accessible. We had a bit of an idea about that. We also had a few negative comments on the process, the outcome of the workshop. So not everybody could see that we had come to a successful outcome, that we had issues. Some people didn't feel that way. Some felt that they could put forward their ideas, so we had mostly positive on that. Was the time used effectively? Again, that was mixed and negative. They felt that conflict was resolved, which was a positive thing. And again, were the workshop expectations met? Well, that was mixed. And a lot of these things had a sort of influence on each other. So if you think with the process, if you think somebody can't hear you, or you don't feel you can hear everybody, you're not going to think the process is great. So we can understand a lot of that, but it was very useful to get this anonymous feedback, because it really helped us think about what is important. So these are a few of the lessons that we learned. We understood that it's important to get a better idea about whether somebody can participate virtually. So going in and hoping that everybody they can join the platforms isn't the way to go. There needs to be a lot more thought process. And we had 2 platforms and we needed to really consider both. Some of the issues were resolved over time, like the bandwidth, so improved for everybody by some miraculous way. So over time, we found that our workshops became better, not by doing anything, but really because some of the issues were resolved with the platforms and the bandwidth. We found that it is important to get this anonymous feedback, because we did tweak up our process. We learned to explain things a little bit better to our participants. And we tried to make sure that more people could participate by sort of helping them a little bit more. We also understood that it's really important to replace things that work really well in face-to-face meetings, like the coffee breaks, the lunch breaks, the kind of chats that build that relationship, which you don't get as easily online. We found these icebreaker games, so this is not the only one, we had another one that we used as well, are very useful in doing that. And we found that whilst face-to-face workshops shouldn't be that long in reality, and especially if you're doing them in healthcare, that's according to our experience, we found that online, it's even more important to have shorter workshops. And we are starting to find that the literature is saying that as well. We found that we needed 3 people to be very comfortable when we were running a workshop. So we, the 2 of us, myself and Antuela, sharing the facilitation, switching roles, but we also found that it was really important to have somebody to manage the chat and to be able to act as an avatar, occasionally post things and check technology and other things. And when we've done facilitated workshops, which are face-to-face, in a normal room, we haven't felt that the need for the third person as much as in the online environment. So we've got time for some questions, but we wondered if you don't have questions, we have one last opportunity for you to contribute. And I don't know if you have any questions. I'm just going to check quickly, but if you don't, we'd rather do the game, which Antuela's doing.
I can't see anything in the chat at the moment.
Okay, so if nobody's got their hand up, we will go to the last Padlet. So what would you like me to do, Antuela? Shall I click on it and go there?
Yeah, yes, please. Yes. So what we wanted to discuss with you is, obviously we shared our experience, and like Kathy said, even though we have had lots of experience of running facilitated workshops, we did want to share with you the experience that we had of running virtual workshops, that we did find some difficulties in making sure that we are adapting our process. So we wanted to also have a discussion with you on your own experience of running facilitated workshops. Were you able to get to find it, Kathy?
I'm just
okay.
Just
Let me try if I have it easy.
Yeah, I've got to get to that link. So
I think I've got it here. Can you see?
Okay.
So really, we have 3 questions for you, and obviously we don't have a lot of time, but that's the beauty of online facilitation, that you can also add comments subsequently. But what we wanted to know is, perhaps if you could tell us, have you had any experience of facilitated experience on the virtual space? So if you could press a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the box, on the burgundy box, that would be useful. And then you can either add comments on the same box, or you can press on the plus button and tell us what you'd like to say. And really, if we wanted to talk to you about, or to hear your views about, what makes a good facilitated workshop. Like Kathy said, in our experience, we achieved our aims of the workshop, but did that really mean that it was a successful workshop? I remember, and probably Kathy, you don't remember, but we spent quite a long time talking afterwards about the dynamics of the group, and it really did create us concerns about how possible is it to handle a group in a environment. So it would be interesting to hear your views. I can see there's something on the chat. Kathy has put the link as well if you wanted to access it. And I can see, Chris, would you like to, oh, okay, that is just a comment. What is anybody who has any answers to our kind of open-ended question, what makes a good facilitated workshop?
Is it going to be open for a bit afterwards, Antuela? Is this Padlet? Yeah. Could we add to this even after we've finished?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
In that case, could I ask Chris if he can do a pitch for the OR conference? Because I think that would be a good idea.
That's fine, yeah.
Thank you.
I won't take much time. I just want to say, yeah, we are running a PSM and software stream at the OR conference at Warwick. It's the 13th to the 15th of September. I really welcome anyone to submit abstracts. Work like this, work that's different to this as well, it is more than welcome. We've managed to get Robert Dyson, who used to be the handling editor for all PSM and software stuff, for EJOR to give the keynote. So he's going to give a very interesting talk on that. Fantastic. And so hopefully we can see many of you and attend and get to know people face to face. And with that, thank you very much for today's session. I've really found it interesting, and I'll hand back over to you to carry on your fantastic work.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Right, and on that note, I'm going to go and find that Padlet.
Yeah, I can see quite a few comments here, especially on my second question on what makes a good facilitated workshop. And if you scroll down, you will see there might be more questions. Is it to achieve objectives? Somebody has added interaction, cameras, participants being engaged, having enough facilitators. And again, that's the beauty of using an independent tool to share views, that I can see now more people are sharing ideas, even on the third topic on bad facilitated workshops and what makes them bad. It's interesting to see. We can see Maya commenting. I hope you are not still driving, Maya. Stakeholders not understanding the point of the activities. Yeah, that happens quite often, especially if there's a drop of bandwidth of people coming in and out. There's more distractions when somebody attends online compared to attending physically in person. Losing focus. Isolation, really very interesting ideas that we probably can share. Unclear process, sometimes the process may feel unclear because you're not really, the cognitive load is quite high. Kathy, if you wanted to share anything, I can see you on my screen, so if you wanted to share before we close.
I just wanted to say that we wanted to come on and give a really honest account, because I think we had to, in a sense, pivot and go from our comfort zone, which was face-to-face workshops, where we could get a really good sense of the room and we could tell at the end that our workshops were working, and suddenly go to this completely new environment online where we had to learn how to use new tools, and under very difficult circumstances. And you know, we wanted to share that struggle. So it could be that in the future we use a different tool, or we have different platforms or whatever, or something else happens. And I think it's important to share the honest experience and say, well, that's the way, you know, that didn't work. You know, maybe we've resolved the problems. We don't have as many bandwidth problems, with the technology works better or whatever. But I think it is always important not to come in and pretend that everything is great, because where you mess up is the opportunity to improve. And hopefully you have found some of this interesting, and maybe you've had similar experiences too.
Very much. Thank you to you both. My sincere apologies for being late, by the way. So yeah, Kathy and Antuela, really interesting. So I think that's a very, I think that you've given us a really great sort of overview of the virtual world, and also of Padlet, of course, which is also really great. Christina, is there anything you wanted to add for at the end of the session?
Hang on. Am I on mute? No,
No,
I'm not on mute.
We can hear you.
Oh, I love tech. No, apart from thank you so much for coming to do this. This was well worth waiting for. It was exactly what we were after. And it was what a lot of people have been really wanting to hear about, how on earth we all handled it when we got locked down. I mean, we still wanted to do facilitated sessions. They were still really important. And we all just, just picked up the baton and ran with it, didn't we? And all the attendant fun that went with it.
It just goes to show that wherever we are thrown, we will find ways to deal with it. But thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Hand up.
So just one very quick question. When you have so much information on Padlet, how do you, I guess, pull it all together and come out with a set of recommendations or outcomes from it? Because obviously it's on their webpage. Do you have to export it and then play with it? And how do you actually kind of end up with a conclusion?
Well, funnily enough, we wrote a report for each of the workshops, and we had the screenshots of the Padlet in the appendices, but we were able to pick out and build a conversation from the comments that we had. We could see how many times, you know, if there were comments that were coming up repeatedly, we were able to talk about that. We were able to bring new ideas. We could see how people were voting or ranking things on occasions. So we had a lot of material that came to very clear conclusions. So we didn't find it difficult, but that was a lot more about the process rather than anything else. So I can't explain how much time we spent in advance designing it so we could get things that we could write about at the end. So we didn't wait for the moment of the workshop to think, what is the question I want to ask? What do I expect to get? Or anything like that. It was all designed and orchestrated so we could create an environment that we could get information, that we would end up with reports, with issues, findings, and specific actions to be taken forward. So this idea, if we take soft systems methodology, which is understand the problem situation, use the model to explore it, then discuss desirable and feasible action, we try to sort of embed that in our philosophy.
And I think we did undertake some problem structuring as well through the process of identifying the key themes. And again, like we were saying, we changed also the process by offering opportunities for voting. So that also would help us to see which were the key themes, which were the ones that people clicked more. So there was a variety of tools, I would say, that we were able to then identify what were the key themes. But it's again, there's two elements to it, not just about the process, not just about the content, but it's also the process, which is really what we focused our conversation today.
Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I have a question if time allows. You put up a really interesting slide earlier that said why we prefer facilitated work as opposed to there. And I noted down things, you can set expectations, you can look at agendas, manage personalities, resolution of conflict, all the information, you can obtain all the information, you can be transparent, creative, and then responsible. You can designate responsibilities and people have ownership, right? So I think we all recognize those. I was interested to know your experience with how that changed when you moved online, right? So you had, that was your reason for liking it when it was offline, when it was face-to-face. Were any of them improved? Were any of them made worse? And kind of, did it change any of that? Not to say it tipped the balance from not wanting to do facilitated work, but what was the impact on those things that you told me that you liked? And I assume that they were your own opinions on what you liked rather than what we liked as a community from anything else. I assume it was your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's my question.
I think the point you're making, Chris, is really useful because, in fact, the fact that there are circumstances that we would think that online facilitation might work better. And one of those was the idea generation, the ability to give people the chance to add in their comments, and they might have been people who wouldn't have not wanted to speak up, for example, or speak in a room, but in the virtual environment, they were able to add their comments or even speak up. People feel more able to do that. So I would say that the enhancement of creativity is one element that we found quite positive or more beneficial with the online workshops. Obviously, we did comment on how to handle personalities and how to develop that rapport, and I think that's never going to change. I think the physical workshops will be able to give that benefit to us. I'll think of more, but Kathy, you might want to.
Yeah, I've thought of something. Different people thrive in different environments, and it might be that the people that don't thrive in the face-to-face workshop thrive more in the online environment. So for example, bizarrely, if you're somebody like me that hates their handwriting, and you're prone to spelling mistakes, you probably prefer to type something in where spell check can pick up things before you put them in. So there are people that might prefer that. There are also people that may have felt comfortable in the sort of anonymity, so people couldn't quite match up the comments to themselves, and maybe what I found, so if you take away the questionnaire and some of the answers, which were in a sense a subset of opinions, because not absolutely everybody filled in the questionnaires, but what we found is that we had a huge amount of material from each workshop, absolutely loads of information. So I would probably say more so than we would have had in a face-to-face workshop. So each mode has its own advantages, and it probably benefits different people. Now, there are certain things from face-to-face workshops that you can't recreate in an online environment. We haven't been able to yet, but that doesn't mean there are strengths as well.
I just wanted to add that Maya has actually said something similar in the chat, indeed, that the ability to record that information means that it was a better way of keeping track of the information which we might have missed in a workshop, or we would have needed to have a recorder. But again, it's not the same as having it there black and white on the screen. I think that was the benefit of the Padlets, which really acts as a sticky note, really.
Yeah, and
quite useful.
With face-to-face workshops, what Antuela and I have done in the past, we've taken pictures, we've rolled them up, taken them home. Half of them have come off on our way back. Then we've thought, what does it say there? Did you understand what that word is? Are you trying to work out what people have written? Whereas on Padlet, you have less work at the end after it than you do when you're doing a face-to-face workshop. So that's kind of another advantage. And that, of course, if you're a participant, you don't care either way. But the other thing of being able to go into something, so some of the workshops, they had access to the Padlets for days later, so they could go and have a look at things. They could go and add another comment if they wanted. So that is also another thing, whereas when the face-to-face workshop is finished, it's finished. You can't add anything more, really.
And it's also hard to find the stakeholders to input to it subsequently. That space in the workshop is really the place where you get all that information. We are aware of time, so Christina, there's a question that I can see from Tony, but Christina, what would you like to do, and Martin?
So I think we're going to have to wrap up at some point, although it doesn't look like the OR Society has actually kicked us off, which is quite nice. So we're still open and we're still recording, yeah? But obviously our sessions are usually an hour long, so I think we need to kind of wrap it up. We've got one question from Tony. Does Padlet timestamp the inputs?
I think it does actually, Tony, and I think you can export things into Excel that have more detail. So it's not something that we've really looked at, but I'm fairly sure you can do more on that if you wanted to.
I mean, we've started using it with students purely because of the anonymity, because the anonymity actually encourages students to speak up about things that they wouldn't otherwise. They don't like asking questions about assignments because they think they look stupid in front of everybody. So you give them Padlet and it's anonymous, and then they can ask questions, and it seems to work very well. More and more of us are picking it up now to use it. So, that's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to encourage with facilitation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm looking here at the screen, and it actually tells you how many minutes when it was updated, when the comment was added. So there is a timestamp to it, definitely.
Marvelous, marvelous. Well, thank you so much. It did occur to me while we were doing this, we have the most amazing resource here of experts we could talk to about facilitation, don't we? I feel some research coming on. We've definitely got a resource here should we need it, certainly. So I'm going to hand over to Martin to round off for today, because he wasn't here at the beginning. Just to say thank you to Kathy and Antuela once more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really fascinating session. So yeah, I think we could certainly continue for quite some while, but we probably do have to wrap it up and let everyone start their weekend. So thanks very much. And yeah, we'll sort of let you all know about the next upcoming session for the PSM SIG in the near future.
Thank you very much for inviting us. And sorry that we've delayed so long, but it was because of COVID the first time round.
No problem. It's fine. It's great
These
to
things
catch up with
happen.
you. Yeah.
You're here now. That's what matters.
Lovely to see everybody, and thanks for all the comments and the contributions in the Padlet.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
bye.
you.